Hey everybody, Tom here. I'm going to show you my first computer. I bought this around 1982, 1983 or so. It was on sale. I paid $239 for it. There were three options at the time. You could get a Color Computer 2 with 64K memory, I think for $399. That one was on sale for maybe $319. This was on sale, I think it was $319 to $239. And I could have gotten a standard basic one for even less money, but basically the three models were a 16K standard basic, 16K extended basic, or 64K extended basic. And I opted for 16K extended basic. So what this has in it is two 8K ROMs. The standard basic had only 8K. The extended basic bought you some additional graphics capabilities and some enhancements that I was interested in. Couldn't quite afford the 64K one. I thought maybe I could upgrade it later, but didn't want to have to upgrade ROMs and that. So I bought this one. It was a lot of fun. I learned on this one. I learned BASIC. This is not the original keyboard. Radio Shack came out with a special purchase, kind of a surprise, on the shelves after I had this for about a couple of years, to find a keyboard with these additional keys. I think it was Control Alt and F1 and F2 were new, and the keyboard layout's a little bit different, but it's the same basic matrix. Inside it's got a 56 pin, it's a 56 key layout, so it has 8 by 7 pins on a ribbon cable. That's how the matrix works for the keyboard. So I'd upgraded this keyboard. The keyboard, turns out, was going to be for the Color Computer 3, which we hadn't seen yet, hadn't been introduced, but I think the reason was the new one came out. The Color Computer 3 was gray, and probably because they produced these in black, they put them out as special purchase. Anyway, I changed the keyboard. I thought I'd show you the inside of it. I'm not going to show you it running, but I'm going to show you a couple neat things I did with this. There have been several iterations of this computer, and this is when they made it much smaller. There were a couple of, well, I won't get into all the details of it, but obviously, you know, they're functionally the same, but when it's a popular machine, they keep building these. They get new chipsets, things get smaller and smaller, they combine chips. This is one of closer to the later versions. So in other words, the first Color Computer was much deeper, had kind of a very simplistic chiclet style keyboard. And this is a later generation where they simplified things, and it has a much smaller motherboard, as you can tell from looking here. So I'll just tell you a couple things about this very quickly here. You can see a lot of videos of people using these things on YouTube and whatnot, so I'm not going to get into showing that, but I'll just talk a little bit about my experience and tell you a little bit about this. Basically, you have an on-off switch here. There's a relay internally which turns on and off a cassette relay. There are 4 connectors in the back. There are a couple for joysticks, so you can play multiplayer games. There was a serial port, and there was a cassette port. And the serial port was basically for an external modem. Back when I first got this, it was a 300 baud modem. You manually connected it. So you have to push connect to the phone line to get a dial tone. You dial a number from your regular phone, and then you'd hang up your other phone, and you'd it's pretty crazy you connected here, but that's the way it was back, as they say, in the day. So this was in the 80s. Anyway, it has a cassette port too, so basically audio in and out. It's an audio interface. Primarily, it does a special kind of, I don't know if it's not FSK. I'm not sure what the modulation method is, to be honest, but it's a way to save data to and from a cassette. Later on, you could get a disk interface, and that's where you could definitely get some more speed, and it opened up some opportunities. So after I had this for a couple of years, I managed to save some money and get a disk drive for this. This disk drive, by the way, is a parallel interface, and it's very fast. This is one advantage it's had over the Commodore 64, which was very popular at the time also. The Commodore 64 was extremely popular. It had a little bit better graphics and had hardware sprites, so you do some neat things with graphics. But it didn't quite have the speed of this one, especially when it came to the disk interface. This had some pretty good capabilities. It uses a Motorola 6809 microprocessor, and it runs under 1 megahertz. Can you believe it? Under 1 megahertz, people. Pretty slow. But it's a standard 8-bit processor. You got a 16-bit address bus, so the maximum amount of memory you can address with this is 64K. And the way they did the 64K in this thing was pretty easily mapped. You have a couple of 8K ROMs, and then you have the rest of the hardware all mapped into the space, the address space above 32K. So everything below that would be for your RAM. So even if you bought a 64K model, you really could only use 32K of RAM on this one. There were tricks to let you use the upper 32K. You could switch banks since it was just 1 bit being flipped. There were some tricks where you could copy the ROMs into RAM and then use that ROMs from the RAM space and then use some more space. But there are also piggyback boards you could do to get up to 512K, which ultimately the Color Computer 3 did have. So the Color Computer 3 replaced the video display generator chip that's in this one, the VGA. video graphics adapter, I think the acronym stands for. They replaced with, I think, an MIME or something, memory memory enhancement in graphics. Now that I'm starting to say it, I get it wrong, but there's a term for it. I feel kind of silly now that I can't say that. But basically, the chip did all the memory management for the microprocessor, so it allowed it to access up 512K of memory through some enhanced modes. So GIME, it was called Graphics Interrupt Memory Enhancement. That's what it was, GIME. I knew it would come to eventually. I bought a Color Computer 3, but by that time, it was kind of late to the game, and it had some capabilities that were kind of neat. But I started using IBM PCs and stuff, and although I got to say, the IBM PCs were kind of fun. Yeah, I can tell you about my first stories with those and building those machines. They were never as much fun as this as an experimenting machine. So I learned BASIC on this. I learned assembler. I wrote a couple of neat little games. You know, I learned how to use machine language subroutines. I learned assembler from this one. So I would write small pieces of code, actually machine level code. So you'd actually go down to the registers and say, grab this chunk of memory here, move it to here. And usually it was loops of things like that. You do sets of data or do manipulations on data, but you could build a portion of your BASIC game in assembler, and from BASIC you could do a call, and you could bring up to, I think, 9 different subroutines. And from the BASIC program, which is very high level, once I got pretty adept at that, I could build, you know, matrices for games and things like that, so you could hold data, and you know, it's the concept of space and whatever. It's hard to explain right now, but basically your game data, how that would play. And then for the actual graphics and things to work, I'd put subroutines into machine language. So I would write little bits of code that had to do things very quickly, because at a high level, the BASIC interpreter always had to be, well, just that as an interpreter. So you run BASIC code, it has to translate to what machine code would be. And doing that on the fly, it makes it, you know, probably 40 times slower than actually directly going to the microprocessor and giving an instruction, a set of instructions what to do. And when you go directly to the instructions and through assembler, talking machine language, it goes very quickly. So pieces of code I would put into the BASIC program, and basically, no pun intended, you would write the program, and then after you're doing your assembler, you'd take the numerical code, and you would add as data statements in the BASIC program. So when the BASIC program first started, you do data, and you have for 2 next loops, you just simply poke it into a space of protected address space in RAM, and then that would become the entry points and exit points for your assembler level code, your machine code, and you call that from BASIC. So that was kind of neat. So anyway, the point was, this was a lot of fun, and you know, it got me into computing, it got me into programming, and did some neat things with it too. I should show you some more things here. We've got this is the RF modulator. So back then, you know, early game sets, you had ColecoVision and or the really popular ones. I can't remember the names of those. But you know, you play Pong and things like that. You hook up to your TV set, and so it's an RF modulator. So it would take what would be otherwise a VGA output, basically, or composite output, and modulate that into channel 3 or 4 for your television set for a standard VHF tuner. That's the way we did things. And it has just a little jack on the back for that. This RCA RF output, and you can select channel 3 or 4. When I started getting more into advanced programming, that TV set wasn't working very well for me, so I added a video output, and that's what this little circuit board here was for. And actually did a couple things. So this, it looks kind of funny, this little set of sockets right here. But what this socket did right here, I had a basically, this is a hex. I think there's a hex inverter chip here. What else is on this one here? Let me see. I'm not sure exactly, but I remember it's been a long time, folks. I pulled this out of a box. It's funny I still have this. Basically, these transistors are an amplifier for video output. So it's a standard output. I added this jack in the back. I hook up a monochrome monitor. So I didn't care about the color on this, even though it said color capability. I was doing programming. I wanted a good, clean color. And I used, I think, a VM2 monitor. If I recall, it was actually amber color, not green. But I had that monitor plugged into this. But the way the color computer normally displays is only uppercase, and it would give you a big green blocky screen. You have 32 characters wide and 16 characters down, all uppercase. Lowercase were shown in inverted case. So if you know your ASCII characters, you learn a little bit about that. You learn that you can flip over one bit and actually invert the case. That's what this basically did right here. So this chip would do an inversion on the correct pin for the video display generator chip, which I'd unplugged and plugged in this socket instead over here. And that way I could have, instead of a green screen with black letters, the whole thing would go black and I have green letters. Although in the case of my monochrome monitor, it was an amber display. Well, anyway, it was really slick. So here I had this neat little computer that one of these switches turns on and off the monitor output, and the other one flips inverts the screen between green letters on black and black on green. So that's what I'd done to modify this thing, and I had a lot of fun with it. By the time I had that, I'd gotten into hard drives and some additional packs to plug into the side here, and had a lot of fun. So I had this and a monochrome monitor, and that taught me programming. This was my start. So today with Raspberry Pis, you have a lot of stuff already out there. You can load up Linux, and you have all kinds of versions of this and that. But way back in the day, the first computer I remember seeing was a TI-99-4. I saw it in San Francisco at a demonstration, and down on Battery and Sansom Street, there was some, I forget what the occasion was, but it was 79, I believe that was. And yeah, I was pretty young back then, but I remember thinking, well, that's pretty cool. And you know, the Commodore 64, Ataris were out there. The color computer intrigued me because it was at Radio Shack. I was always a big Radio Shack fan. I loved the electronic stuff there. And they had an audio spectrum analyzer plugged into this thing. Steve Jork, I think, had programmed it, so it did some cool, colorful things with the audio from audio input coming through this cassette interface jacks, as I mentioned earlier, which is actually just an audio in and out interface. Of course, these couldn't do any kind of audio stuff like today's WAV files and MP3 stuff like that. That was way beyond the capability of something like this. But it did have a way to take a look at the audio coming in and give you an audio spectrum and do some colorful graphics with it. So that intrigued me also. So I picked the color computer, and I stand by the choice. I think any computer you pick, as long as you get into it, you start using it, that's all you need. Today you have a lot of options, but back this was my start, color computer 2. So I thought I'd show you that today. I'll put this back together, put it back in the box, but this was my start in computing. Hope you enjoyed the story. Take care.